Well, hey guys, welcome to the studio. Today we're going to take a hard look at dynamics. And an interesting point about any sound that you can listen to only ever has three attributes. The first is pitch, and we've got enormous ways to control pitch. Pitch bending, pitch correction, melodies, stacked melodies, harmonies, chords, all that. That's pitch. The second thing is the timbre, or the waveform of the note. It's the way that I can tell a trumpet from a violin if they're both playing the exact same pitch. And the third and final thing is amplitude, volume. How loud is something? Does it start loud and get quiet like a plucked guitar? Does it creep up in volume like a bow being dragged across violin strings? What kind of controls do we have for this in our mixes? And are we abusing it? Let's get into it. Now here's what we're talking about. Here's a song that starts out very quietly and it does a build up and then it has a big part and then it calms down and you can see there's breaks in it. And how does this work? Well, it works like music works in the real world. And the reason that song looked like that is because that's how that song was arranged. It just starts with a piano, later the bass comes in, later the drums come in, the vocals kind of follow how loud the music is going throughout the song. So that's kind of your step one. Is the song arranged in a way that it's going to have some dynamics in its volume? Now let's say that we've done that. We've arranged the song well. It's got some dynamics in it. We'll play a brief example here of something that kind of breathes a little bit. Nice sax. Nice percussives. That saxophone comes to us courtesy of Native Instruments. Now, we all know the fastest way to kill the dynamics is just throw a compressor on it, and by definition, that's what it does. I have level matched these two examples so we could really hear them, not changing volumes, but listening to the compressor just rob the song of dynamics. We'll start with the compressor on. And here it is off. Kind of makes you wonder why we use compression. There are reasons for it, but this is not it. And incidentally, we were running that compressor as a limiter because we had the ratio set up higher than 10:1. So it was really a big limiter. And what it did is it took everything that was loud and turned it down a great deal. And then we just turned up the entire mix to the same volume it had before, but with no appreciable change in volume throughout. It was kind of all one big blanket of volume. Not what we hear in nature. So what's the opposite of compression? It's something called expansion, and you have it if you have access to a gate. Here we have an SSL gate from console 1. I've soloed the drum track so I can show you specifically what it's doing, and I'm only going to be messing with one knob labeled sustain, which kind of works like compression, but I can turn it negative. We've got the sustain starting at 0. I'll turn it positive. You'll hear the compression type sound, but then I'll go negative, and that's expansion. Heavily compressed. Ooh, almost too snappy. Have control over it. Now, you'll find on some hardware compressors, sometimes they do have a button called expansion or expander. That's what this does. It just turns a compressor the opposite direction. But I found in the box, the thing that works best for me is to use a gate and use it to chop something back to be like sort of the opposite of compression, where it's not always this giant wall of in-your-face sound. We have another option, a transient shaper. We're looking here at Native Instruments Abbey Road drums, the 50s drummer specifically. I've soloed the snare, and I can go down to the transient master, and I can mess with the attack portion and the sustain portion of that snare. Again, if I bring up a lot of attack and remove a lot of sustain, it becomes sort of the opposite of compression. Let's check it out. Ooh, you hear all that thwack? Let me turn that down. Okay, let's add some sustain to it. This will be like adding compression to it. Lingering, long, an endless wash of sound that never goes away, but I can kill it. Let's bring up some attack with less sustain. Ooh, pure punch. Transient shapers really work the opposite of how a compressor works. Now, this is all stuff that I do in the mix to try to keep everything from becoming overwhelmingly whooshy. I like to have impacts. I like when things quiet down. I like for them to actually quiet down, just like a band would actually play it. Now, when it comes to mastering, we have a whole separate video talking about compression and limiters being placed on the master. But for right now, since we're only dealing with things in the mix and things like individual drum hits and that type of stuff, these are my go-to ways of controlling that. And we have kind of a tough decision to make because a lot of producers in the world are putting out very heavily compressed, limited masters. They're kind of loud all the way through the song, and we're competing with that. But once in a while, I go back and I look at Stairway to Heaven, or really anything from Pink Floyd or from Steely Dan. Like the graph I showed you on the song in the beginning of this video, we saw some dynamics throughout the song. And those are the mixes that stick with me as some of the finest mixes I've ever heard. So what can we do? Well, let's arrange the song properly to begin with so we don't have these issues. That would be like a smart place to start so we're not fighting it later. The second thing would be take a look at using a gate on certain things. Take a look at using transient shapers. They work well on drums. They work well on basses. Do your mix with automation if you need to get the levels where you want them under control. Because I think we kind of get lazy. We say, well, we'll throw a compressor onto each track and then we'll just set the level of the track and that'll be the level probably throughout the whole song, or maybe change a little bit in the chorus or something like that. Perhaps we've grown lazy. And this is not a giant advertisement for you to stop using compression and stop using limiters. But think, where do you want compression in your mix? Where does it suit the mix for the sound that you're hearing, for the amplitude of that instrument on that track in that moment? Does it need to be compressed? Well, guys, I had a lot of fun putting this video together for you today. I hope you got something out of it. Don't forget to come visit us on Facebook at Recording Tips and click subscribe if you like what you're seeing here. It does help the channel. It's free, and we got a lot of work to do. Let's get to it.